Our main objectives today are to help you explore the differences between the multi-mode delivery of T-levels compared to other level 3 programs, to review the challenges and opportunities in designing an effective T-level curriculum, to develop your ideas for T-level planning with colleagues, and to support the submission of the initial draft of your T-level planner at the end of this term. I would like to start this afternoon by passing you over to David Thomas from the Department for Education. David, would you like to introduce yourself and the work that you are undertaking?
Of course. Hi. Thank you, Richard. My name's David Thomas. I'm a user researcher at the Department for Education. Work with the team who look after the Support with Delivering T-levels website. And I have hopefully what is quite a fun and interactive session planned, 10 or 15 minutes or so. And hopefully I'll be able to share my screen here in a moment so I can show you what I'm talking about as opposed to just talking about it. So if I can just make sure that everybody can see that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. So as I said, my name's David Thomas, and I'm a user researcher with the Department for Education and Skills Funding Agency. And I wanted to come today and thank you, AoC, for inviting me to come along and speak with you to provide some updates on the Support with Delivering T-levels website and a little quiz as well. So introduction. Some of the new things that we have launched on the Support with Delivering T-levels website is actually on the TLIPS website, which is our employer support website, which I will show you shortly, is a find a provider feature. So this allows employers to find local provision in a frictionless way. So I will show you what that looks like at the moment. On the Support with Delivering T-levels website, we have a new area for providers like yourselves who are just starting their T-level journey. And we'd love to obviously get feedback from you about how that is working for you or not. We'll have a little quiz, and I'm going to hopefully get some of you involved with the future development of the support website. And I did notice in the list of participants that I already have some of your contact details, and I've already spoken to one of you. I believe I saw Alok there as well. So that's great to see. So without further ado, I'll just take you through some of those features and things that we're working on at the moment. Right, so find a provider. On the employer support website, which is is employers.tlevels.gov.uk. We've included a new feature which allows employers to effectively, very quickly, find their nearest T-level provider. What I am showing here is a screenshot of one of my local searches. So I searched my own postcode, and I am seeing that there are 2 colleges that are in relatively close distance, but Warwickshire College is clearly probably the closest college for me as an employer. And the one thing that I wanted to kind of show to you is the information that's being displayed in this Find a Provider feature is pulled from the course directory. So the information that's often shown there is an info or inquiries email address, which is not necessarily the most useful if you're thinking from the employer perspective. They probably like to see something that's a little bit more like T-levels team or employers at, or whatever it might be. So we are looking at enhancing this feature. And I think it's a really important feature. And the reason that I think it's important, I don't know if you're aware, but there is obviously the Plan for Jobs campaign. The Plan for Jobs campaign is going to link directly to this employer website that I've describing here. And so that Find a Provider feature that I've been discussing will be the way that employers start to look and see if there are any colleges that are delivering T-levels locally. So we think it's quite a key and exciting bit of campaign alignment work with the employer website. So that's the first one. And then new to T-levels. So I hope that this will be of use to you. And I would love to hear about your experience of using it. I'm just, my screen is not, just do that again. So that's come up. Is that coming up okay again?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So this is the new to T-levels area. So this is actually on the support website. It's a new area of the website, and we are really, really interested, as I've said, in getting your thoughts on whether you find this a useful resource or not. So what we've tried to accomplish here is we detail some of the most useful guidance, information, case studies, along what we think is the correct journey of discovery effectively for T-level providers. And we'd love to get your feedback on whether that actually meets your needs or not. So it is really new, and hopefully, as I've said before, is of use to you as well. Hot quiz, hot shot. So there will be a quiz within a quiz in a moment as well. So I'm just going to flip over to another screen here. And what I'd like us to do, hopefully everybody has a mobile phone handy. And what if you could head over to www.menti.com and input this 8-digit code, and I'll just give everybody a few minutes to do so. Is we're going to I need to get some insight really about how much new T-level providers are aware of the support website. And also in almost kind of a straw poll fashion, hear from you about what are the most important things to you at the moment, what information or guidance or whatever you would expect government, us, the Department for Education and Skills Funding Agency to be providing to you, so that we can be aware of the things that we need to look at. Okay, I've got one thumb. That means at least one person is in there. 3 people, brilliant, good. Oh, look at all those thumbs, good stuff. Okay, so we'll go on to the first one. And as I said before, there's a quiz within a quiz here. So each slide has an image next to it. And I want you to think as well about what movie this image is from. So these are the headlines. We've had that new area created for new providers. The updated content from AoC has been added as well. Forms are live, but they're a bit quiet at the moment. There's a key dates calendar, which we actually put onto the website based on feedback from providers like yourself. So these key dates will start to expose updates from ministers, workshops, and all sorts of things like that. And we're trying to obviously incorporate as many of those important dates around submission requirements and all those sorts of things as possible. We want to iterate and improve that feature around key dates. So again, it's an opportunity hopefully for you to feedback to us about how useful that calendar is for you. What we have noticed from analytics, that engagement in the website is picked up at the beginning of the school year, but it's kind of tailed off, and I guess that we'd expect that really. So remember this picture, and we'll see how many people were successful. First question then, taking a straw poll, have you visited support.tlevels.gov.uk? So that's the Support with Delivering T-Levels website that I've been describing, and we'll start seeing what the makeup of that is. Brilliant, everybody's using it, this is awesome. Not everybody's using it, sorry. Everybody's able to use Menti. Clearly support.tlevels.gov.uk is not necessarily known. So hopefully that's new and useful information to you already. I'm going to go ahead and skip on to the next one. 50 sounds like a pretty reasonable number. Think about that image as well. Where do we think that support, the most famous high five in all of cinema is from? This is really the big question for me, I think. At this stage of your T-level journey as a new provider, what is the main thing that you need from government? And I've given some examples of things that we've heard from providers, and we just want to get a straw poll feel for what, if there was one thing, what is the main thing that you'd expect to get from government at this stage? Okay, great. Okay, that one's pretty clear. And again, for those of you that haven't been to the website or were unaware of it up until this point today, the link should be available to you at support.tlevels.gov.uk. That new to T-levels area where we have that step-by-step guide is there. And we'd really, really love to get some feedback on whether that meets your needs or there's actually things that you'd expect to be there that weren't there. And I'll leave my contact details at the end of this presentation as well. Great, thank you ever so much for that. Another picture. All right, so I wonder how many of you think that you've got all three here. Pop quiz hotshot is, of course, Speed, 1994, starring Keanu Reeves. The headlines was Wag the Dog, 1997. Support with Delivering the High Five is Predator, which is 1987. And Help Me Help You is Jerry Maguire, 1996. And these are all brilliant films, by the way. If you haven't seen any of these, I recommend that you spend some time over your Christmas holidays catching up on some amazing, amazing Hollywood moments. All right. Thank you ever so much for your time. If you'd like to get involved with research, I can't promise it's as fun as this quiz has been, especially particularly for me, but it would be really helpful for us to make sure that as an organization, government, the Royal we are actually helping you with the things that you need from us. And we obviously want to support you in any way that we can, but we want to make sure that we're doing that in the right way. I've left my contact details here. Please get in touch, david.thomas@digital.education.gov.uk. We can set aside some time to have a chat, whether it's 30 minutes, an hour, whatever we can do to kind of fit within your schedule. I'd really love to hear from you. But yeah, that's me. Thank you ever so much for your time. Have there been any, I see there's 7 messages in the chat. So I'll just stop my share for a moment there and have a quick look and see if there's anything there for me. Oh no, it's just all questions about menti.com and the web link. That's brilliant. Thank you for that, Stephen, for putting those through. Yes, so that's me. Thank you ever so much again for your time, and I hope that the rest of the session is really helpful and useful to you. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. And actually, if we get any questions, we'll pass them on to you as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to now pass you over to Chris Cherry from the Strategic Development Network, who is going to tell us more about T-level curriculum planning. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Thanks, Richard, and good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, Chris Cherry. I'm a strategic associate with SDN. SDN are contracted by the DFE to run the employer support program. So the employers.bit of the website, but also have been supporting a lot of providers and colleges in particular around bringing in T-levels into the curriculum planning, and that's really the focus for this afternoon's session. I don't have a quiz. I might throw in the odd movie reference as we go through it, but you won't be asked to name a film. Maybe Show Me the Money, I guess, towards the end of my discussion as well. Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about 30 minutes or so on some of the curriculum differences between a T-level and other programs, just to give you some thoughts and some heads up really on the type of curriculum development you're going to need to think about, particularly when we have multi-mode teaching and learning, multi-mode assessment, but also industry placements built into it. So first of all, a couple of slides on the very obvious and how T-levels fit within the overarching curriculum planning, I think, as far as policy determines. So T-levels are intended to be a first choice program, and that means that someone who's taken their GCSEs can look at T-levels as one of the primary choices for their post-16 education and training. And the T-level then really sits between 2 different camps, and it tries to bring elements of both. So it has the rigor and the examination content of the A-level program, which we're all very, very familiar with, but also the workplace experience and extended workplace experience in the industry placement that the apprenticeship program has. And in fact, the T-level and the apprenticeship at the occupational specialism level share very, very similar knowledge, skills and behaviours requirements, and the word competence forms part of the T-level language as well as the apprenticeship language. So there's DNA shared between A-levels and T-levels and apprenticeship programs. And of course, in terms of destination, sort of after the completion of the T-level program, then higher education, skilled employment and degree apprenticeships, integrated and non-integrated, are available as well. So it should be seen as part of the vocational and academic mix in terms of those post-16 choices. So that's probably something that we all know and very, very familiar with. But let's break down the T-level a little bit further, perhaps one stage more in terms of planning, and see really what the key intent is for the T-level program. So it's a 2-year program. It's very much akin to the A-level in terms of the academic structure. So it's 2 years college-based or school and training provider-based, so that there's a mix of academic training depending on the local geography and how you as colleges work together with training providers, schools, and your employers. And 80% of the time is spent on the technical qualification. So the first layer of the T-level is that TQ, the technical qualification. And that's a substantial amount of teaching, learning, and assessment in a controlled environment that you are able to design and develop a curriculum that delivers the core knowledge and requirement and the occupational specialism as well. Alongside the core and occupational specialism, so the core is shared between all programs in a particular T-level pathway, but the occupational specialism is one layer down of division. So there may be many occupational specialisms inside the overarching T-level. As well as that core training, occupational specialism training and learning, we have a requirement for English and maths. The exit requirement has changed. We'll come on to that flexibility later on. And there might be other qualifications and requirements as well. For example, there might be a health and safety or a regulated qualification that's mandated in terms of the ultimate occupation, particularly things like health and safety and so forth. So that's the area that you have significant control over in terms of curriculum planning and building your teaching and learning strategy around. Let's move briefly on, and we'll come back to it again a little bit later on, that 20% time, which is the industry placement. This is where you will need to develop relationships strategically and operationally, I think, with employers locally. For example, you might want employers to offer industry placements, but you might also want employers to help deliver the curriculum, perhaps provide equipment or access to resources that allows the occupational specialism, if you like, to come alive as well. The industry placement is supposed to be meaningful work. So it's not work experience. It's not time spent entirely supernumerary. There's an intention that actually the T-level learner will form part of the workforce for the time that they're there. And that, of course, means we have to have good relationships and good communication with employers so that they fully understand what a T-level industry placement is and how it differs from an apprenticeship. So many employers are used to recruiting apprentices and working with you as colleges as an apprentice relationship. But this is slightly different. So it's not about replacing apprenticeships. It's actually about other learners who would not made a positive choice to do an apprenticeship being available in the workforce. So again, it's some subtle messaging and well thought through and well understood curriculum planning as well. Okay, so broadly speaking, what is the kind of the assessment mix that's required? So if we look at the core line first, the top line, that core program should be learning objectives based on the knowledge and some of the skills that are required to be successful in that occupation. So if you were thinking about the industry placement, clearly before a learner goes on industry placement, they ought to have some underpinning knowledge of that course. So there's your first curriculum planning question, is how do industry placements and the core link together? And to do that successfully, you'd need probably to think a little bit differently about your initial and diagnostic assessment. You're looking to recruit learners who are going to be able to cope with the academic rigor of the T-level, and some of the early feedback from the T-levels is that it is academically rigorous as well. But they're also going to have to understand how to do extended projects, to be self-reliant, self-starting. And of course, when they go out to their industry placement, they've got to be able to negotiate travel and working with an employer as well. So that brings a whole range of extra diagnostic issues for you when it comes to matching and placing learners, both as T-level learners and with an individual employer as well. The core is, as you can see, assessed by examinations and an employer set project. And the employer in this case is not the placement employer, but actually the awarding organisation that creates the project as well. So there's your rigorous academic levels. That's the closest match, I suppose, to A-level programs, is that this is a knowledge and skills-based learning and teaching program. Underneath that is the occupational specialisms. This is a layer of technical detail, one layer down from the core. This is where perhaps you might want to have an employer involved in helping and supporting the curriculum, being able to, as I said, provide resources, access to equipment, facilities, and people who are occupationally credible and, of course, occupationally current as well. And the specialism ought to be, but may not necessarily exclusively be, assessed by a practical assessment. So some element of applying the knowledge and skills into a vocational context. And again, you have a lot of agency and control over that as well, but that's quite different to an A-level type examination. This is much more practically based and will be a challenge in terms of resources as well. And then the third line, this is where we start to involve a much larger network of support from your employers in your location for the industry placement. So there's a minimum number of hours. It's conceived as being that 20%. So it is a 1 day a week program, minimum of 315 hours, but many placements are much more than that. For example, childcare is more than double that 315 hours. There are some flexibilities about managing placements, and I'll go on to some of those a little bit later on as well, but it doesn't have to be one employee. You can have 2 employers involved. If you have learners with SEND, then there are some flexibilities and some reasonable adjustments that we make in terms of that as well. Learners can include proper grown-up part-time workers. The policy was originally described, so that not just time spent with an employer, but along the lines of that occupation that they're working to as well. And there are some other short-term flexibilities in the post-COVID world, but it probably won't apply to you in terms of planning, because that will be some distance into the future. And I'm sure by that time, those short-term flexibilities will have disappeared. So it's going to focus one more on that industry placement slide, because this is probably the area of greatest change and difference between existing programs and the T-level program as well. So obviously they're 16 to 19-year-olds. It's a 16 to 19-year-old program, which means, of course, that many learners are under the age of 18. So some occupations which are age dependent may initially appear to be inaccessible to learners. But there are ways to sequence the curriculum and manage the curriculum to overcome that. Many employers are willing to accommodate under 18 learners in an industry placement environment when they probably wouldn't do in terms of full-time employment. As far as possible, placement should be in that real environment. So employers should be encouraged to use real client work, if you like, real supervision and accountabilities which contribute positively to the employer, and not just simulated tasks in the corner of a room on a computer. We're looking at that 315 hours, which equates to 45 days or 9 weeks if you want to do it in a block way. Some employers much prefer to have learners as a block. Perhaps there's a seasonal dimension, or there's a geographical dimension, or an occupational dimension. So, for example, construction might say, well, actually, between April and September, that's the time when we're most active. That's the time when we want to have placements. There's no point in having a placement in January, because there won't be work for them involved at all. Again, as far as possible, linking the placement to the occupational specialism. So there will be a need to have a curriculum conversation between the placement and the curriculum team. So, for example, if you said, well, you know what, 1 day a week does work really well, at what point could you let the learner take part in their placement if they haven't got the underlying occupational skills? What about if the employee needs, naming names, to have an ability to use a computer, so Microsoft Office packages, but that doesn't come in your curriculum until the middle of the second year. So there's an element of sequencing and timing involved as well, to allow the learner to be as ready to go as possible in terms of their placement. And of course, you might have learners on the same programs that have a different mix of attendance in placements because of the way in which their employers want to offer the program. So a single curriculum offer won't work for the range of employers that you have locally, even though they're on the same occupational area and the same occupational specialism. So, for example, here's some models of day release E as it appears on the screen. Obviously, we changed to a widescreen format. We've now got day release E. Anyway, so there are generally 3 models for placements. There's that day release model, there's a block release, or a mixed. Obviously, there would be a mix, wouldn't there? So some employers are very used to a day release. If the learner comes every week on a Tuesday, we know they're coming, we can plan for it, and the work they're doing isn't time dependent, so they can move forward and forward and forward and forward as the weeks pass. Some employers might say, well, you know, actually, we would rather have them to come for 9 weeks in May, and June and July, because that's when we have a piece of work, a project, they can be part of the team for that, and they'll see it to completion. There might be some employers, and there have been some that have said, look, why don't we start with a bit of immersion? So come for a week, learn us, learn the ways of working, learn how we operate as an organization, and then actually come 1 day a week after that. Or another employer I can think of who said, right, if you just come 1 day a week for the first 6 or 7 weeks, we'll do one different element of our business each week, and we'll do a quick quiz on what we're doing to make sure you're feeling ready to go, then come for an extended period of time, come for 3 weeks and do some real work project. Now that does create you some curriculum questions about how that learner is going to attend the college in the meantime, because if you're thinking, visualizing, you know, a cohort or a group of learners, then if you've got Monday morning, 9 o'clock, we're doing this piece of work, but actually your learner's off on placement, they're going to miss out on some of that curriculum delivery. So there are some challenges in terms of that as well, especially when you look at some of the flexibilities that are built into the placement. So for the convenience of the employer, there are some placements built in as well. So you could have 2 employers for the placement. So again, you could now be splitting all of those complexities between 2 employers who may have very different expectations for the placement. And if breaking into 2 means that actually there's a much less time for one employer, it might be less meaningful in terms of their investment, if you like, in that learner as well. So it's something to think about, positive flexibility, but we've got to manage it really, really carefully. Placements are recorded in hours, so that's the basic unit of attendance. That just breaks it down from days where day length is different and occupations have different ways of attending. We don't want to encourage particularly our just 1 hour slot, so just come to us for the hour. We'd expect it to be, you know, a substantive block, but the measurement is in hours as well. Part-time and taster work can count as long as it is occupationally credible. That's fine. There are some route-specific flexibilities. Now, they may change by the time that you come to need to think about industry placement. So we won't overly focus on those as well. But there is a removal of the maths and English exit requirements. So the onus on the training is really about that initial diagnostic work and the support the college offers learners to ensure that maths and English levels are where they need to be. Now, obviously, if you have an occupational specialism that depends heavily on maths or English as a vocational subject, clearly that will be different as far as you're concerned. Your teaching and learning program will contain much more specific and direct training for maths and English as well. Okay, let's look at how learners are assessed and some of the curriculum questions. I want to queue up our discussion, which comes straight after me this afternoon. So there's a whole lot of stuff on the screen in terms of the assessment, but just break it down. So the TQ is in visual and in emotional terms aligned quite closely to an A level. So we have examinations graded A star to E, and their examinations and an employer set project, which is an extended project, the length of which and the complexity of which is set by the individual awarding organisations for the qualification. So it's worth checking in terms of the release of T-levels and the timing, which awarding organisations are offering that T-level and how they're going to approach assessment. In general, it's 2-3 papers of an hour or so, something like that, and a 30 to 60 hour project, something like that as well in terms of the outcomes. You want to visualise it, but they are a little bit different. There are some subtle differences between them. The TQ has a linkage with the apprenticeship world, so it's a more vocational, so you can see the language of apprenticeships coming through in terms of the assessment, pass, merit and distinction as being the grading that's available. And we have this overall synoptic assessment. So if you do apprenticeships, think about the endpoint assessment being a synoptic assessment. It's been visualized something around how that endpoint assessment might work. Generally more on the written and observed element, but again, each TQ is assessed individually. So you need to look at the awarding organisation's requirements for that. Many of them are involving other projects and other written evidence, so tangibles, as opposed to an observation with a written record afterwards. And when you put it all together, there's a massive spreadsheet to put it all together. We end up with a combined grade, which would be pass, merit, distinction, or distinction star. So, you know, super distinction as well. The methods of assessment are various. So just in terms of summary, then we have examinations in the style that you would imagine. So rigorous question-led, task-led examinations, focusing mostly on the knowledge, some of the skills, and some of the behaviors bit, if you like, but it's really about the understanding of those core concepts. So you won't survive in construction if you don't know the following 10 key bits of information, and that's what the examination will focus on. We then have the employer set project. So just a quick reminder that the employer here is the awarding organization who will have a group of employers to help set the project. It's not set by the placement employer, so that's a different relationship. It may be possible that elements of the placement can influence how the learner responds to the set project, but it's not intended to be through that route. So again, it's coverage of core knowledge and skills with a practical and a practice-led component. And again, how that will shake out is yet to be seen because we haven't had large numbers of employer set projects in terms of outcomes yet. So it's too early to evaluate how ESPs are being put together and how successful they've been. And obviously we have specialist assignments as well, so project-led work. And this is obviously the specialist skills, the technical skills, the last layer, if you like, of knowledge requirement for learners in an individual occupation as well. Now, if you can see that in terms of assessment as a curriculum or examination or assessment process, then there's going to be a lot of support required for learners to be able to move from GCSE examination rigors into the T-level rigors as well, probably more so than it would be for either the A-level or the apprenticeship in terms of endpoint assessment. So again, there's a curriculum discussion to be had, and we'll open the doors on that this afternoon when you go into your individual groups. So the next couple of slides are a bit word heavy, but I'm not going to go through them line by line. I'm just going to give you some three points really in terms of the content. So how to get workplace practice built in. So you'll see from the awarding organisation, the T-level providers support materials, the outline content, the syllabus, the scheme, the rubric, whatever it may be, will talk about the knowledge and skills and the intended assessment method. That should be your first line to think about how the curriculum should flow. What you don't get is a weekly timetable for the curriculum. You won't get a week 1, week 2 breakdown. And it'll feel slightly different to, say, an A-level syllabus and curriculum mix where learning objectives or assessment objectives are clear. It's less so. They present you the knowledge and skills required and how it be assessed. Then how you do that in terms of course design, teaching and learning strategies, that's entirely up to you. And again, thinking about how individual learners in an occupational specialism work with their employers and how individual learners on occupational specialism are sequenced in terms of curriculum to allow them to be successful in the assessment as well. There's an intention in the policy that learners get going on practical skills really from the beginning, as if they were going on placement really quickly. So there's very immersive in the workplace activity as far as possible. So that's one of the key questions. That's one of the really fundamental differences between the A-level and the T-level is being able to build in practical skills right at the very start of the program in the early days. And as far as your content development, then what we're looking for, say we, the big we, DFE and others in terms of design, experience-led learning. Now, this is a relatively new concept in vocational education in England. But experience-led learning is always often is problem solved as well, is where you actually immerse in a particular workplace issue and the learning comes out of the resolution rather than here's some content, I'm going to go through it and then test you on it. So it's not block-led, it's actually experience-led. So the intention is to try and freshen up the way we do teaching and learning, and that will be very different from the A-level as well. Okay, so that's again quite content heavy, but I hope you see the direction that we're going in that one as well. In terms of skills, proficiencies and competence, now the T-level and the apprenticeship share common knowledge, skills and behaviours. The route panels set the objectives overarching for all of the occupations. And so what we're looking for in the apprenticeship is competence to be assured. So you won't achieve the apprenticeship until you are competent. Whereas in the T-level, it's about working towards competency. So you are workplace ready, but you're not judged to be able to work with minimal supervision, which is one of the tests for competence in the apprenticeship world. So again, we're looking at genuine workplace demands, the real competencies, but we are assessing them and teaching them in a slightly novel and different way as well. So we think about, in terms of this example in engineering, is that as far as possible, the levels of competence are set for inside the placement to make sure the placement is as effective as possible, and the occupational specialism teaching confirms that those levels of competence have been matched. And that's really for you as colleges to design that program as well. And occupational specialist skills, so only certain learners in your overarching T-level group are going to need these particular skills because their placement or because their route requires it. So not all learners on engineering are going to need to use certain equipment or certain key concepts. So again, you think about how your curriculum will be made to work. Okay, so I've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. I just want to do a quick mention of SEND learners. I think, and this has been borne out, that actually T-levels will create a greater spread of the types of SEND issues that we see in terms of post-16 learning as well. Obviously, when it comes to access to T-levels and access to that wide range of teaching and learning strategies, we've got to make sure that equality and equity inside that are assured as far as possible. We do that. That's what we do for a living. That's absolutely, I'm sure, not going to be an issue. But the availability of placements in terms of geographical, occupational, sectoral specialisms may have an impact. So not all learners will be able to access all occupational specialisms, placements or employers without significant investment in adjustments. Or in fact, in some cases, it will be probably impossible. We have to be able to understand how we would demonstrate that in terms of fairness of access to all learners, that if they're going to be excluded, it's for the right reasons and not just for ease of access or convenience for any of the parties concerned. And there are, of course, legal and regulatory contexts in which that will work as well. Okay, so again, in terms of the awarding organisations, part of the award of the T-level in order to offer them is to have a significant investment in SEND. So alternative formats, reasonable adjustments are going to be required for the wide range of assessment strategies that are being put in place, much more than an A-level and actually much more probably than the equivalent apprenticeship, if there is one as well. So making sure that we have good access arrangements and good SEND arrangements is key when we build the programme at the start. And that again goes right back to your initial and diagnostic assessment as well. So that's where it's really important to have a clear focus on it. Okay, I'm just going to finish now with a couple of models, a couple of visuals before we move into our session for discussion and the breakouts. So just visualize the program from left to right as time passes, and you'll probably start with a lot of teaching and learning, classroom based. It will feel quite A-level in terms of the delivery style and structure that put in place. But as time passes, you might need to bring in some formative assessment and some thoughts about the practicality of that skills development. So bringing in the specialism as well. Towards the end of that, we'll have preparation for examinations and projects. So how early do you talk about project skills or self-reliance or self-study or being able to do your own research? How soon do you start to talk about, I'm going to go on placement, what's it like being on placement? How do I act and work in the world of work as well? Because at some point at the end of that, we've got all of our assessment coming through. And obviously year 1 and year 2 will look a little bit different as well. But visualize between, we move from just pure teaching and learning of core into other things. And therefore it might look something like this. This is very typical of this kind of teaching and learning structure that we see. As again, time passes from left to right. We see that most learners start with core training and some occupational specialism training as well. So those two programs start almost at the start. And then we start to bring assessments in a sliding way. So some awarding organisations for T-levels have examination windows in January. Some of them don't. Some of them have only assessment at the end of each year. So your assessment and exam window will shift accordingly. But your assessment of employer set project may be more flexible. You can do those at any point. So again, when they occur and how they occur might be a slightly different slider in terms of that. And then again, for the assignment, we're probably tied to key dates in the year. So your curriculum planning, as much flexibility as you may have, you've still got some fixed deadlines in terms of the awarding organisation as well. So one of the curriculum thoughts is the sequencing. Okay, I want to queue up our discussion time. That's going to have about half an hour or so, 25 to 30 minutes in your breakout groups where you can put the cameras on, open up your microphones and discuss some key topics. I'm just going to give you some stimulus, some food for that discussion as well. So one of the most common quotes in terms of vocational in England has come over the last 20 years or so with the onset of modern apprenticeships and new study programs as well. So this was a comment from a Learning Autonomy and Post-Compulsory Education, the Politics and Practice of Formative Assessment, Eccleston 2002. This is something to debate and discuss. Some of the occupational qualifications in England have been made so specific that learning consists of meeting hundreds of competence statements, leading to a tick box approach in which learners are hunters and gatherers of information without deep engagement in either content or process. So it's a recurring observation of the English system when it comes to vocational, and it hasn't really gone away. So do we feel that we have learners who are hunters and gatherers of information to tick a competence box and actually they don't get the deep engagement? Is T-levels a solution to that? And is that a way in which we can start to think about T-levels as well? So have a think about that statement. Think about that in terms of the conversation we're going to have in a few moments. So the occupational bit is so tied down that actually the way to achieve it is to go and find elements of knowledge, say, I've got it, thank you, tick it off, move on to the next one. So it's filling up a vessel from the beginning, a bit like Grad Grind. I think it was Bleak House talked about filling the empty vessels of the boys and girls. So that's one view of vocational learning. Is that right? Is that how we do it currently? And is that going to be challenged in the world of T-level? So it's a discussion point. I'm hoping that we don't have qualifications like that, but that's something that keeps on recurring and reappearing. Okay, let's introduce the breakout session. I've got 1 minute left. It took me about 1 minute to introduce it, and also our facilitator colleagues get them ready for the breakout sessions as well. So we've got about 30 minutes or so, 25 to 30 minutes for a breakout session. And there are 3 themed questions that we want everybody to tackle. Roughly 10 minutes each, but we've got a little window for the third question for it to be 5 minutes. So they'll be introduced by your facilitator, but let's have a look at the spirit of those questions. I'm just going to look at my other screen so I can see them. So the technical qual contains 2 distinct components, core and occupational specialism. Are there any specific design considerations for the curriculum to ensure learners are as close to full competence as possible? That goes down to the curriculum question about how you plan a curriculum so that learners can land in their placement, be credible, and they can leave the T-level with occupational competence as developed as far as possible. Theme 2, the pattern of teaching and learning, the mixed mode of assessment and industry placements may present challenges for curriculum planning for learners with SEND. In fact, for all learners, because they probably won't have seen that amount of mixed teaching, learning and assessment strategies. Will it flush out unacknowledged learning issues and development issues? Let's have a think about that one for those 10 minutes. And also look at solutions. How might we as a team tackle those new and novel complications to being successful in learning? And then the question for theme 3, 5 minutes and possibly 10 if we have time. Resounding feedback from employers says that students should start to develop technical and practical skills from the beginning of their programs. So therefore, what challenges does this present in terms of planning an exciting curriculum? So you go on placement with the tools and knowledge and understanding ready to be successful. It sounds obvious, sounds like exactly what you would do, but actually in curriculum terms, it's quite a challenge to get there. So Richard, thank you everyone for listening. Hand back to you now to set up our breakout sessions.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that presentation, which I think has set us up nicely for the breakout session. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you've had some valuable discussion with your colleagues. So we're just going to take a few moments to hear back from some of the sessions. So I'm going to start with Tony. Tony, can you start by telling us about some of the discussion you've had in your breakout room?
Yes, we looked at the first question about the qualification containing 2 specific components, the core and the occupational specialism. But what we really established was that everybody was very much at the start of the journey and just exploring where to go with all of this. And so one of the things we talked about and was mentioned was employer engagement and how that's going to help determine how you set up the course over the 2 years. But it was also noted that for some of the providers, there is an issue that they're going to need to think about in terms of the numbers they've got on the course. And whereas with the BTECs, for example, they've been able to accommodate like a handful of students doing nursing, a handful want to do midwifery and so on, it might be more difficult to do that with the T-level. So that will need a bit of thought moving forward. We also very briefly mentioned the GCSEs and how You know, we've all heard the recent announcement it's changed, but it doesn't really appear to have made much difference to what people are going to ask for. Most people will still be requiring minimum of grade 4s to get in the T-levels, and in some areas they need a higher grade if there's a sort of science element to it as well.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I don't know if Chris, I can see you're still here. I don't know if you want to make any comments on that.
Yes, very happy to. Yeah, I think you're right with the maths and English. I think when it comes to that initial diagnostic and your course requirements, I don't think a lot will change because it is a very rigorous entry qualification. So you probably would say grade 4 or better would be that. I think the flexibility built in for those learners where they haven't responded so well to a GCSE type examination, but the T-level might unlock that potential until you realise that actually I can cope with it because it's part of something else as well. That might be helpful, I think. So hopefully it's widening the ability rather than narrowing it down. So yeah, good you had a chance to discuss that. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Right, let's move on now to Mary. Mary, what were the main points from your breakout room?
Well, we had some quite interesting discussions, actually. I don't know whether we stuck exactly to question 2. But one of the biggest issues is the industrial placements. I think that's a theme running through most of our discussions. I'll come back to that in a minute. The other aspect is some of the groups saw it as a higher level of teaching than they're currently doing on the BTECs, higher academic level, as Chris had said. And they can see the need for the staff to really access some training and development to teach to the assessment methods that will be required at the end. There's also some of the questions around the marketing and communication still of T-levels, and you know, will students at the end of the day in 2023 still be choosing A-levels rather than T-levels? And there's some fears around that, really, that, you know, they're not sure at the moment whether there's enough people out there that have a good grasp and understanding, such as parents and students, that they will be recruiting onto it. Regarding SEND learners, many of them are doing supported internships, and they see them as very valuable at the moment, and they're not quite sure whether the T-level would give the same value to the SEND learner. And one of the participants has some high-level autistic learners, and when they've been going out for work placements, if the employer suddenly changes at the last minute, that has a really negative impact on the learner. And it can be a demotivating factor. So, and going back to industrial placements, another problem is where you could plan before on a study program, all the learners will go out at this time in the curriculum. This choice and working and collaboration with employers can make the delivery of the curriculum very difficult to deliver, to make sure that every learner is at the same point that they need to be at to go out on a work placement. I think that's about it, but we did have a good discussion.
Yeah, it sounds like you covered quite a range there, Mary. I don't know if Chris wants to pick up on any one of those things and comment on it.
I will. Yes, thank you. So the quick one is the threat to A-levels of a T-level, or the reverse, that T-levels will be competing with A-levels and they will lose out, is a live question. But of course, T-levels are intended to fill the gap that A-levels and apprenticeships couldn't. So I think it's going to take time for everyone to appreciate what a T-level is and why I might actively choose that and not an A-level, or vice versa. So I think it does offer something different as opposed to a competitor. But good that we're tackling the question, because it's worth thinking about curriculum as well. Quick one as well on the third point about, I think it was the learners that, because of flexibility might mean that some learners who could cope with structure don't have that structure anymore, or the structure becomes too fluid. Yes, and that's why I said at the start that SEND learners are going to need very careful planning, because by goodness, T-levels would work very well for some learners with autism. I've seen a couple of digital learners who have done brilliantly on placement. They realise that actually this is for them, But exactly the changes to and the flexibilities of the program mean that teaching doesn't work the way they want to. So great that was picked up. And I wonder whether the practitioner was on there and already had a learner in that situation, because that's absolutely spot on.
And it was digital. There
It
were
was digital. It may well be the same case that I'm referring to.
Yes.
And the third one about the curriculum bit, yeah, that's it, isn't it? The curriculum's hard to plan. One to many, many to many, and many to one is going to be very difficult for us all. So good that you're taking that head on. So thanks, Mary. Sounds like a good discussion.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed it. I hope they did.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Chris. Right, now we'll move on to Steve. Steve, did your session come up with anything else that we need to add?
Yeah, well, we covered question 3 in the first instance, so about the feedback from employers saying that students should start to develop technical and practical skills from the beginning of the programs. We had a mix of providers, and it appeared to be easier done in terms of things like skill scans and activities like that, where providers are already delivering apprenticeships, and so a similar type of model in there. Providers who don't have quite so much experience in, like maybe schools providers or sixth form college providers who don't have an apprenticeship provision, will be looking at trying to sort of devise something to try and identify what the students can and can't do from early on in the program. Other things that we talked about in terms of trying to make the opportunities exciting is to try and get employers involved, and more than just employers taking industry placements, but employers trying to encourage employers to be more involved. So we had one example within the group. It was for media, so it's not a T level that's out now, but they actually do sort of project based, and when they try to incorporate all the different key skills, and then they'll get external experts in, so they'll get screenwriters in to deliver a bit for screenwriting, they'll get other people in to deliver on other bits, and they'll actually buy in different experts. And I think that's probably key to successful T level delivery, in terms of there's not a perfect teacher who's able to deliver all the T level content, so it's figuring out where we can pull in other people. We talked about the sort of the issues relating to try and locate providers, and a couple of examples that I gave which are worthy of sharing is one of the providers that we're working with in the Northwest. Grade providers, gold, silver, bronze and platinum providers, given their level of commitment, and they tell the providers they're gold provider, they tell the provider they're a silver provider, and the providers are quite keen to figure out if I'm a bronze provider, how do I get to become a silver, and what level of commitment do I have to give? So it's a win-win situation all round, because everybody wins out of that. And then just finally, we said other providers that we know we're working with, anytime they have a parents' evening or an open evening or something, they try and capture what parents do as part of their job. Just to sort of try and figure out then, is there a network there that's untapped in terms of trying to access employers who potentially may come in and work with students and maybe take students on industry placement.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So again, I don't know if Chris, you want to kind of follow up on any of those?
Yeah, just a quick one for me. I wonder if that was Manchester College you were talking about, Steve, with the goals. Yeah, I wonder that. I can see them from the window over here. The one I want to pick on is the employer's involvement. So yeah, offers of placements, but I see some great practice where employers are actually delivering the curriculum. So they're offering resources. They've got experts going in, not just delivering inspirational talks, but actually some of the core curriculum components, how to do CAD, how to do in digital, some ticket manipulation, or using different programming languages, sort of, C++, Python, all that kind of thing. Actually come and do that in the classroom as well. This is what the industry actually does. So if you can get employers to do that, that will make a massive difference to the quality of your program. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Actually, Steve, I know you've been monitoring the chat. Are there any questions that come up in the chat that we need to pass on to Chris?
Well, I was monitoring the chat till I went into my breakout room. I think at this stage, I think we need just to have a look at the, we'll pick out the chat, we'll record the questions in the chat, and we'll pass them to Chris for maybe a more considered response, and then we'll go back to people afterwards.
Brilliant. Okay, in that case, I shall move on. I think because I think we're on time, which is good. So we'll do the last few parts. So I'll start sharing my screen again. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the event now. So we have a few more pieces of information that we'd like to share with you before we bring the meeting to a close. Firstly, thanks for your feedback from the last event in October.
Can't see screen, Richard.
Sorry, you can't see it?
No.
Oh, it's not sharing, is it? Try again. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Brilliant, sorry about that. Okay, thanks for your feedback from the last event in October. One common theme was a desire to meet with Wave 1 and Wave 2 providers. Therefore, our next event in the new year will be a Q&A discussion with some of these first T-level providers. We've also tried to take into account that many of you have teaching commitments. So I know we started slightly earlier last time. So as a result, we moved the start time of this event to a little bit later to try and help with people being able to access. So hopefully that has been helpful to you. Next, I'd like to remind you all about the T-level planner. We've had a really good response to this so far, with 150 of you already signed up. Applying is really easy. Just put the following information in an email and send to the T-level support email address, which is shown on screen. Next, we'll now be putting a link to an evaluation form into the chat. Hopefully one of my colleagues will be doing that. We'd really appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to complete this, as it really does help us provide the best support we can to you. And it really won't take more than a couple of minutes. It's mostly sort of tick boxes, and there is an option to kind of put some comments in as well. But please do take the time to complete that before you leave at the end of the presentation. I'd also like to remind you of the following. On December the 7th, there is a webinar with the Minister for Skills, Alex Burghardt. You can find the link to sign up to this in the DFE section on our Padlet site. Then at the start of December, we will be sending out the first of our regular monthly updates to you. Hopefully you'll find this useful and informative. At the end of term, we'll be asking for the first submission of your T-level plans. We have received a few questions around what we are expecting for the first submission, and we'll provide you with some additional guidance early next week. We'll then be contacting you in the new year to arrange a meeting to discuss your plans. And finally, Sitting Guilds have some webinars in early December aimed at those planning for the land-based T-level. Again, more information is available in Padlet. And last but not least, I've mentioned Padlet a couple of times, so a reminder that we have collated a wide range of T-level information on our Padlet site. Please do share Padlet with your colleagues. You can scan the QR code that's currently on screen, or you can use the link that is being shared in the chat. So all it leaves is for me to say thank you very much for your attendance. Please do fill in the online evaluation form, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event in the new year. Thank you very much.